My decision not to eat meat comes from three main perspectives. An environmental perspective, a health perspective, and an ethical perspective. And obviously not everybody subscribes to the same understanding of morality, but it is definitely worth considering because it's a big reason why a lot of people decide to be vegetarians. Eating meat is one of the most destructive things we can do for our planet, and I've done a lot of research on this, so I have some numbers here. According to the UN Food and Agricultural Organization, 70% of all agricultural land, which is about 30% of all the ice-free terrestrial surface land on the planet, is used for raising livestock. So animal farming is accountable for about 14.5% of all anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. This is carbon dioxide, which is emitted by the fossil fuel consumption used for the production of grain fields on which the livestock feed. And then methane is emitted through enteric fermentation, which, as you might have heard before, when ruminants, now raised in large quantities like cows and sheep, digest their food, they emit methane. And actually, collectively emit about 80 million metric tons of methane every year. And cattle in the US alone emit about 5.5 tons of that. So it's about 20% of our nation's annual methane emissions come from raising livestock. And nitrous oxide emissions because of the synthetic chemical fertilizers that we use to manipulate the crops, which again, the livestock are fed with. The Environmental Working Group suggests that about 72% of farmed salmon's emissions and 68% of tuna's emissions are generated during the production phase. So nitrous oxide is emitted during feed production, and carbon dioxide is emitted with any transportation involved in the process. And emissions for any fish species are actually elevated because the producers are making more than we actually need. Consumers often throw away a significant amount of what they buy, so for every pound that is produced, a portion of that is wasted, and unnecessary greenhouse gases are emitted because of that. Greenhouse gas emissions aside, the meat industry is also destroying the planet through deforestation. And this has already affected the Earth's forests on an enormous scale. National Geographic actually says that at the current rate of deforestation, the world's rainforests could completely disappear within 100 years. This is resulting in a lack of habitat for millions of species, and it's also driving climate change, as you know, trees absorb carbon dioxide, and also they shield the ground from the sunlight. So with the trees gone, all our rainforests are just becoming like dry, barren deserts. I don't need to eat meat, and I don't feel like I vote with my dollar, and I don't feel that supporting the meat industry is the best thing for the planet right now. Environmental perspective aside, eating meat, there's some research to support that it doesn't really factor into a healthy lifestyle for a lot of people. Before I talk too much about this, I actually want to note that as far as I know, there's some dispute among nutritional and anthropological scientists about whether humans were actually ever supposed to eat meat. There's an argument that although behaviorally we are omnivores, anatomically we're actually supposed to be herbivores, and this is based on indicators like our jaw movements and our intestinal length and our stomach acidity and just the way that our bodies handle cholesterol and protein. Whether or not we are supposed to be eating meat technically, we definitely don't need it. Any kind of necessary nutrients, protein, omega-3s, calcium, iron, you can get that as a vegetarian. You just need to know where to look, what kind of plant-based foods to get that from in your diet. The World Health Organization has declared processed meat as carcinogenic. It can increase the risk of colon or rectum cancer by 18%. And in 2014, a Harvard study found that one daily serving of red meat during adolescent years is associated with a 22% higher risk of premenopausal breast cancer. And during adulthood, that same consumption amount is resulting at 13% increased risk of breast cancer. Processed red meats are also linked to a significantly increased risk of heart disease. None of that sounds good to me, so I stay away from that. So what's in our foods? Food is another big factor about why I decide I don't eat meat. Slaughterhouse waste, such as blood, grease, feathers, condemned animal carcasses, bones, all get sent to rendering plants along with other products, including euthanized pets. And these ingredients at the rendering plants, no matter how decomposed, contaminated, drug-infused, cancerous, get boiled down and basically recycled as feed. So we feed the livestock this waste, essentially, and we also give them antibodies and hormones to kind of fatten them up before they're slaughtered. The National Institute of Health suggests that this poses a big threat to our health, and that we can develop foodborne illnesses, bacterial infection, antibody resistance, and that we can become more susceptible to more dangerous chronic diseases. So the truth is, we don't really know enough about what we're putting in our food, and also what we're putting in our food, to know how it's going to affect us, and how that's going to change our health. Fecal contamination is also kind of a problem, especially in chickens. So Neil Barnard, the founder of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, suggests that fecal contamination in chicken meat is very common, and this is even true with most organic meat, because after the chickens are slaughtered, a mechanical device removes their intestines, which makes it kind of is messy, so fecal matter gets on them, and then they are moved directly to a chilled tank of water, nicknamed fecal soup. And they want the chickens to absorb the water because chicken is sold by the pound, and the heavier the chicken is, well, the more money they're going to get. This contaminated water basically is absorbed by the chicken, which we eventually eat. A committee conducted a study, found the majority of our meat is contaminated. 8 beef recalls and between 2000 and 2009 due to contamination, so almost 1 per year. I don't know if I have to explain why this is a problem, but feces can contain bacteria, undigested food, excreted drugs, parasites. It's not good, okay? And also, it's gross. We need to be thinking about what we're eating and if we really want to be taking these kinds of risks. The last perspective from which to examine this is an ethical perspective. What ethically are we doing when we eat meat, and what are we doing when we slaughter animals? Are we slaughtering them in a humane way? What is a humane way to slaughter an animal? So the Humane Slaughter Act, which is a U.S. federal law, passed in the 1950s, 1958, states that in order for a slaughter to be humane, it must involve rendering the livestock unconscious before they are slaughtered. So animals are restrained in cramped boxes and then delivered an electrical shock to the brain or shot in the head with a gun. And some of these ways of rendering them unconscious are actually reversible. And cattle do become conscious sometimes during the bleeding process before dying of cerebral anoxia because oxygen can't get to their brains. So one of the cheapest humane ways of rendering livestock unconscious is by hitting them on their heads with a giant hammer. So the undercover videos and images from investigations of slaughterhouses are constantly being leaked, which shows us that although maybe not permitted by law, this inhumane slaughtering still does occur, and it's a very real thing, whether it's acknowledged or not. The Humane Act also excludes poultry and fish. The Humane Society describes some of the most common ways that chickens are slaughtered. Factory farm chickens are shackled and wait sometimes for hours, long periods of time, upside down. They get shocked into paralysis and have their throats cut and then are drowned in scalding hot water. And these kinds of slaughter methods are not covered in the Humane Slaughter Act. According to the Animal Legal Defense Fund, this treatment is not illegal under most criminal animal cruelty laws, and many states exclude chickens from legal protection altogether. And some get around it by saying they're against unnecessary animal cruelty, and since food is necessary, somehow it's okay. I think ethically what we need to ask ourselves in doing this, because by supporting what goes on in these slaughterhouses, we are doing it, I think that's fair to say, is can we justify it? You know, is there a way that we can justify what we do? You know, animals really don't have any rights, any voices, and to me, wanting to eat meat liking the way it tastes or anything like that doesn't seem like a strong enough reason for me to make that kind of decision when I am aware of the negative impacts that it has on the environment and on my own health and how these animals are treated. You know, to me that seems like a no-brainer after, you know, even just a little bit of research about this. So if anyone has any other thoughts, let me know, and thanks for watching.